I was thinking last night about why teenagers are worse than toddlers.
And there's so many reasons. Toddlers, you can throw in a room and they can't get out.
Technically.
Teenagers will come out.
They always come out.
That's why you have to put locks on the outside of their door.
No. You can't do that.
And then the other reason teenagers are worse than toddlers is they get lippy.
No, they have more words. They have way more words. They're not as cute when they throw a tantrum either.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Are toddlers cute when they throw a tantrum?
No. Other people's toddlers are kind of cute.
Makes you feel better.
Exactly. It does.
Yeah.
You're like, aw. Your own, you're like, oh my goodness.
Well, on that note, we're talking about things we're thankful for. No.
We're doing a Christmas edition.
Yeah, Christmas edition, dealing...
Talking about miracles, dealing. You're using all these negative words.
Having to put up with how God does things.
How God reverses terrible situations. No, we're talking about miracles today.
No, we're talking about,
And
tis the
season.
The season.
Also, we're sick, if you can't tell already.
Oh my goodness.
So please ignore our pathetic sounding voices.
That and
our snifflings.
And having my brain is so full. I've had several meetings recently where I've introed the meeting with, hey, you're going to have to forgive me. And especially new meetings, like with new people that I've never met. Like, hey, you have to forgive me. I have very little filter because my head is full. And so please don't take anything I say as who I actually am.
Yeah, I got lost on my way to pick up the girls last night from their class.
I didn't know that.
I didn't tell you.
No.
It's stupid.
It's hilarious.
I missed my turn, and I was halfway to Lake Victor before I realized it. So
Where's that at?
exactly.
Oh, is it as you're turning, kind of like...
Yeah, instead of taking the turn, you just go straight. Yeah.
Wow, I've never gone past that.
I know, it's very obvious. It's very obvious where it is. So I shouldn't have missed it.
No. What I'm saying is I've never gone past it as in, like, I've never made that mistake. But it's like literally that I have no reason to go further than that.
I know.
And never have. And so I have no idea what's past that.
I am very proud about my ability to have good direction, so it's always humiliating for me when something like that happens.
I usually mark it on the calendar.
I'm very high and mighty about my skills.
Welcome to Shoot the Breeze, a podcast that celebrates the messiness of life, relationships, and Christianity, featuring my wife Lacey and myself, Nathan. It's creatively titled because it will be just us shooting the breeze, sometimes with guests, while occasionally saying something important. We hope you enjoy. Hey, babe.
Hey.
So
basically, we're just going to tell stories of miracles we've personally experienced, and
this is going to be a rough one.
It's going to be good. Miracles we've experienced in our own life, ways that God has just come through for us in supernatural ways, and also we would love to hear some of your own stories. So if you have stories where the Lord has met you, or you were blown away by His goodness, we would love to have you comment and just hear your own story. So
yes, remember, if you're listening to this on Rumble, you could just leave a comment, subscribe, like it, and leave a comment, or on Spotify. Those are the two favorite ones.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I think we were gonna start with the fact that it was recently Nathan's birthday. He turned 40.
The big 40.
The big 40, which, I mean, is pretty incredible.
It is pretty incredible. The doctor said I was diagnosed with CF, within 6 months of being born, and the doctor said I probably wouldn't live to a year. And it's like every few months or years, they would kind of put the new expiration date on. And so, pretty great, pretty amazing. I mean, praise God, for that.
Yeah. And the thing with cystic fibrosis is that I mean, and I'm kind of just rounding things out right now, but back in the 50s, if you were to be born with cystic fibrosis, basically you wouldn't live past a few days. You would just die.
Right.
And then as the decades progressed, it got a little bit later on in life. But even when Nathan was born in the early 80s, life expectancy was still around 8 to 12 years old. It was very, I mean, it was known as a childhood disease because people didn't
make it to
adulthood. Yeah. And he's the first generation that has been living into adulthood and being able to have families and have jobs and
which I mean it's always hard to say because there's like a spectrum. I'm not talking about like autism, but it's like degrees of severity with cystic fibrosis. Right. And
there's so many different mutations.
Yeah.
Right?
And so it's like my generation with the mutation and all of that I had, which leans more towards the more severe one. It's the first one. And so like even Lacey and I, as we got married, you were with me when I made that first jump from childhood clinic or pediatrics to adult clinic.
And it was such a creeper about it too. Well, you know what, like the children's hospital, they're like fun and games and they're trying to keep the kids enterseen, right? And he grew up in that. Can. Yeah, exactly. He grew up in that. So I remember he was checking in for a hospitalization, and he was, how old were you, 22?
I was like 22ish.
And he's like, can I be on the normal floor? And they're like, you're an adult now, you got to be on the adult floor. Yeah. And I'm just looking at him, and he's like this grown man asking to be put in with the kids. I'm like, honey, they're gonna think you're such a creeper. And he's like, but it's my floor. But like, I'm sorry,
but the adult floor is boring.
No, you can't. He's like, I want to go down. I'm like, you can't sneak down to the kids' floor. I don't care how many fun, fuzzy memories you have. But
guess what I did when you weren't there?
Oh.
Anyways, yeah. So Lacey and I joke as we've traveled around now. Lacey and I joke about how we look for clinics.
Yeah, well, you know how good a clinic is depending on if it has an adult clinic or not.
Right, because if it doesn't, they don't need one.
Yeah, exactly. Beware.
Yeah. So, hey, anyone listening who has cystic fibrosis,
find one with a good adult clinic.
That's a pro tip.
It is. So anyway, when you were born, you were born in Homer, Alaska.
Yeah.
And Homer now... Mm-hmm. I can't handle it. I can't imagine then.
Yeah, right.
40 years ago.
Medically.
Yeah. So you were the youngest of 3 kids. So your mom had you. It was a pretty intense pregnancy. She said that she actually was a month overdue with you when you were born.
Yeah, I was due October, and I was born in December. So she carried me.
A long time.
January is the only month she did not carry me.
Crazy.
So moms out there, suck it up.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
Nice. Anyway, so she had him. He was very small. They couldn't figure out why he wasn't gaining weight. And at that time, I think things have progressed since then. But at that time, the only way to really tell if somebody has cystic fibrosis was via a salt test. And
which, I mean, kind of right off the bat, an immediate is still a salt test. Obviously, you could do a DNA and all of that test, but a sodium chloride test.
Yeah, but I think they can tell I haven't looked into it recently, but I think they can tell a lot faster now. Like, whereas before the minimum age was 18 months.
Right.
To get it.
Right.
They could suspect it.
Right.
And I think that's what they did with you, but they couldn't get a official diagnosis until about that old. So when they finally got an official diagnosis, he couldn't be treated in Alaska at all. Mm-hmm. They had to fly him to Seattle. And by this time, you were several years old and barely making it, really.
Well, and I was going to say the first miracle that we witnessed, and I don't remember a lot of the details around it. I don't remember the details around it.
Vague shapes and...
No, it just kind of from what my parents said is that my lungs had collapsed and that they needed to life flight me from Homer. I think it was from Homer to Anchorage, or maybe it was from Anchorage to Seattle. I forget what it was. But that there was cloud cover. It was storming pretty heavily and pretty bad. And so they said that, hey, we can't the plane had taken off already, and it was trying to land where I was. Like I said, whether it was Homer to Anchorage or Anchorage to Seattle, but my parents were praying. They had a group of friends praying, and all of a sudden, just over the airport, like it opened up, like to be clear skies. And so the plane was able to land, grab me, take me. And so that was like the first miracle that my parents talk about with regard to, my life with CF and everything, is just the fact that a plane was able to land, get me
Get you
into,
there.
yeah.
You know, fun fact about that flight is 25 years later, the government tried to bill Nathan for that flight. Do you remember we got that bill for that?
Oh my goodness, I totally forgot about that. Yes.
We did. We got a bill for that. And I was like, number one, we're not paying that because that's ridiculous. Number two, technically they need to bill your dad.
So that's what it was, is I went into Social Security and I said, hey, so this is weird. And I had like 5 different accounts opened up
Under
with Social
your
Security.
one number, yeah.
Yeah. Under my one number. And it was just a weird thing.
It was. So anyway, the clouds parted. You were able to be seen, life flighted into Seattle.
A Learjet.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. So you get there.
Yep.
And you are basically fighting for your life the whole time you're in the hospital there. And
I'm not doing much. I'm really just laying there.
Right. Well, and apparently, Nathan's parents were pastors in Alaska, and they were connected to a lot of churches. And Alaska itself is kind of like a small town. It technically has 700,000 people now, but then it was even less. And most communities are very close-knit, and especially different circles. So anyway, his parents had a lot of people praying for him. And it was just really, like the stories we've heard, it was a really incredible time of the community coming together to pray for you and believe for miracles for you. Oh, I told you I wasn't going to cry on this podcast.
You're already
doing it.
There's better things that you should cry about.
I know, but it's been really cool because through our whole marriage, people will meet Nathan and they'd be like, oh my gosh, I prayed for you when you were a baby.
These are communities all over Alaska that from Homer to Wasilla and Willow and Talkeetna and Fairbanks, kind of all the way through Alaska. When I meet people and they're like, oh my goodness, yeah, I remember Larry, I remember your family, I remember, or I'll go to a function and they're like, yeah, whatever happened to your brother? He had a disease. I was like, oh, that's actually me. And they're like, oh my goodness.
Well, my favorite is when they say, we prayed for you, we didn't think you'd make it. The prayers of faith. But anyway, so he's in the hospital. I remember your mom actually tells this pretty incredible story where you, and this was this the same time or was this a different time?
So it was, okay, let me finish that one story. So my lungs had collapsed. They had crystallized mucus. Sorry, had crystallized mucus, and again praying. They had taken an X-ray. They saw the collapsed lung. They saw the mucus, and then like a week later, they took another X-ray, and both lungs fully inflated, 0 mucus in the lungs. And so they're like miracle. I've never been healed of cystic fibrosis, but it's like this has started a trajectory of God being
incredibly faithful in the midst.
Intimately involved in my life.
Yeah.
And then, like to the story you're talking about where I was in the hospital, I had stopped breathing, my alarms, things are beeping off in my room. Oh, no. I'm so sorry. No, back up. So I'm in.
Should I tell the story? Because I feel like I remember it.
I'm good.
You sure? Your mom was with you.
My mom was
You
with
were
me.
in the hospital room.
Yes.
And the alarms were not going off.
They were not.
Nothing was going off because you had stabilized.
Thank you.
So she, poor mama, had fallen asleep. And all of a sudden, she sees...
No. So a nurse comes in and taps her on the shoulder.
That's what I said.
Yeah.
Or that's what I was going to... Why'd you get ahead of me?
She doesn't see. She was sleeping.
Okay, so...
Wakes her up.
Oh, can I say she sees somebody tapping on her shoulder? Could I say it? Could I have said that? Could you have given me a chance?
No, because that's inaccurate. Just like the alarms going off.
Okay, so a nurse taps her on the shoulder. She wakes up, and this nurse is in, your classic 1950s nurse's outfit, like
And
the
this is
little
the 80s.
hat and the,
Yeah, keep in mind, this is the 80s.
right, the little cutesy uniform they used to have to wear, and tells her, you need to check on your son. And she goes, okay, and my mother-in-law's super sweet, and so I think she just woke up, checked on him, realized that Nathan wasn't breathing. So she starts looking around for this nurse to try to get her to help her, and realize the nurse is not there. So she, rallies, gets staffing around to bring Nathan back. And at the end of it all, when Nathan is stabilized, she starts asking about this person. And they're like, what, are you crazy? We don't have anybody here where's that? I don't know who you're talking about, right? And so to this day, she doesn't know who it was that came and woke her up. But saved Nathan at that point, too.
Yeah, so that was, another, like I said, those faithful God moments that even though I may not be healed, God has been intimately involved in my life and in the miracles that we have experienced. And, it's hard because those aren't, this is going to sound weird, but those aren't personal miracles for me because I've heard about them third hand, right? Like from my mom.
They happened to you.
They happened to me, but it's like I didn't, when you can't cognitively.
But does that mean they're not personal?
No, but what I'm saying is, what I was going to say is I still give God thanks for those, like acknowledging his presence, acknowledging what he's done. And I think that's an important thing in people's lives, that even if they hear about a miracle third hand, right? That do we take a moment, do we take a beat and go, God, thank you so much for that? Do we acknowledge what God has done? And I think it's learning the habit of choosing to see God in things that allows us to see more miracles.
Right. Well, and it's that whole concept of when the Old Testament, we have the Israelites being led out of Egypt, and they experience just a gamut of miracles right off the bat. Like bam, 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 bam. And you're in the midst of miracles like that in your life. Sometimes we're in seasons where we really do feel the hand of God, and we think to ourselves, I will never forget this. Oh my gosh, his faithfulness. Oh, so real. It's so real to me right now. I'll never forget this time. It's so incredible, And yet God knows us. He knows how we think and how we process things. And so he says to them, write these things down, tell them to your children, make memorial stones, do what you can to remember what I've done. And I kick myself too. There's a lot of these stories, a lot of little parts of these stories through our life. We've had a lot of miracles happen that I wish I would have written down, but I get so busy, get so tired, I get so routine sometimes that you just don't. And but these are the things, because we do forget, that we can look back and say, oh, look how incredibly faithful he is. Like for us personally, when we get discouraged that this disease hasn't been taken away, this is what we go back to is, but look at how he's sustained. Look at how he's always provided, right? And so it's this idea of, are we making memorial stones? Are we writing these things down? Are we telling other people, specifically our children and family members, about what the Lord has done and acknowledging it as supernatural, you know?
It is, I know for the longest time, kind of the idea of, coincidence, and I remember very vividly, and I forget when, but I remember me having to make the decision of, I will no longer say that something is a coincidence. I will choose to say, okay, God is moving in this.
Oh, it doesn't matter. I just been praying for this, and this totally came in at the right time, and
yeah, right.
And we're like, oh, quinky dink. It's like,
no, but it is funny how. So I grew up more conservative side. You were more charismatic side. We prayed for miracles, but like, you always kind of discount them.
Well, and I think the thing...
maybe not in my family. I want to give my mom and dad and our friends and people who've prayed for me credit. But it's like in generally in that atmosphere.
Too, this is what you and I do, is we get into these situations and we think to ourselves, oh my gosh. Like as my nephew would say, what is going to happen? my 3-year-old nephew, what is going to happen? So we're just like, what is going to happen? What are we going to do? And we think that there's only one way the Lord can fix this. And you have in your head this one way the Lord can fix it. And then out of left field, here comes this solution. Mm-hmm. And it's so creative, or it's so normative, or it's so, it just makes so much sense, right? That you almost discount like, oh, because he didn't come through the way I was thinking is the only way, then it's not a miracle anymore. And it's like, no. He got so creative.
Yeah.
Your brain didn't know what to do. You're like, oh, wow, there's more than one solution, more than my way to figure this out, you know? And I've learned to value that. And I've even learned to keep my mind neutral about how things are going to work out.
Yeah.
And that's really hard.
Well, and it's, what was it? We were talking this morning, kind of preparing for this, how I think, what was the phrase? I really like the phrase that I said, that when we give up our expectation for how God is going to do something, that's when we start to see miracles, right? That when I give up how I think it should be solved, or you and I have strategized enough and we've planned enough, and so A is going to lead to B and then C, and then, you know, when we've when we release our expectations, and then, like, I think that's when we make way for the miraculous, for, oh, wow, God worked beyond even our own creativity of what we thought or could be even. And he's just constantly doing that. But I think you have to have your hand open for how, when you do pray, do you pray into an answer you've already predetermined should be? Or do you pray that God will move and you are along for the ride, essentially? And there might be things along the way that he asks of you, right? But it's the idea of, and I don't think we do this intentionally, where it's like, I will pray for a predetermined answer. But even in the act of praying, in the back of your mind, you're like, okay, so this will do this. And then that's how it'll be solved. But I'm going to pray to him just so I let him know that I'm thinking about it. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Okay, yeah. But no, I think that's vital, that we give up our expectation for how we think God should move, and then we start to experience miracles.
Yeah.
Or maybe even maybe acknowledge that they're miracles outside of what generally happens.
So, I mean, we're talking about your disease, so I'm kind of on that track, some of the things I was thinking about. And you know what's, I think we kind of take it for granted how many times the Lord has met us with your disease, because, and here's the hard thing, it's a need that doesn't go away.
Oh, yeah.
And we have consistent issues with it. And so it's not like the miracles are any less impressive. They're just needed so much that I think we've tended to normalize them. So back early when we were first married, you know, we were so young and
naive,
really, and we were literally just trying to make it. And he had one, and I remember we were in our tiny little cave apartment. It had like one window, and that was a time we had went through a season where we weren't willing to commit to a church. We were just like, we're free. Yeah. And Nathan was like this traveling drummer. He would like, remember that?
Yeah, I was on a traveling worship band.
Yeah,
that
we
would
just
kind
like,
of guess.
And it gave us an excuse not to commit to a church. Right. And the Lord really convicted us. And he's like, I want you to commit to a church.
Yep.
And it's not going to be perfect. You're not going to like everything, but I want you to commit. Mm-hmm. And so we chose a church, and we just committed to it, and we dove in, and we started getting involved with the youth group. We kind of went to youth pastor, and we had applied for a job of the youth pastor there and got rejected. And so we were kind of a little hurt over that. And we're just like, no, we're just going to do it and be obedient. So we went to youth pastor and was like, how can we serve you? Yeah. And we engaged. Yeah. Well, then a few months later, he got this notice that his meds weren't going to be covered the next month.
There was some, it was the...
They don't need to know all the brain government issues. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, there's so many. Anyway, it wasn't going to be covered. And
I was going to say most of the miracles have to do with government.
It does. It really does. They all do. And so he was told, you're not going to get covered. And at the time, your meds were on $50,000 a month-ish. Yeah. And they said it's probably they weren't sure how to work it out. It was probably going to get worked out, but it might take a few months.
Yeah.
And everything was up in the air. And I mean, we're talking like our $500 rent payment was like excruciating at this time, you know, for us. And we tell some people, and our church started holding prayer meetings on his behalf at lunchtime every day.
Yeah.
For like a week. And people would come, they'd leave their jobs, and they'd come and they'd be praying for you. And I remember somebody from the church called Nathan personally, and he was a businessman, and he told Nathan, he goes, I want you to know that no matter what happens, I'm going to cover your meds, no matter how much they cost, until this gets straightened out. I just want you to have that reassurance. And he never had to do it. Mm-hmm. But the fact that he was willing to, it was just so incredible. It was like the Lord met our need in our community that we had trusted him to provide for us, right? And it was just, the whole sequence of it was such an incredible thing. And that church was a very important place to us as we started our marriage and as we kind of grew in that understanding of what it really means to have community.
Right. And that church also paid, so when we got married, that church also paid for us to go to a marriage conference, which I honestly don't remember anything from the marriage conference except for this. And this has actually been one of the things that has held Lacey and I together through our marriage is at the marriage conference, they would just say, hey, tell your spouse you are not my enemy. And it was like, it's the only thing I remember.
It is the only thing I remember too.
But it's the thing, how much of our marriage and getting through, literally just getting through,
is not looking at each other as the enemy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. It's that time in our life, we were so naive and we had no idea what we were up against. And I think as slowly we started to realizing it, it became incredibly overwhelming. And yet that whole time, the Lord was working to provide us with what we needed before we even knew we needed it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so it's like by the time we realized what we were up against, he already had a solution in place for us.
Right.
And so that was a pretty wild ride, that whole season. But I'm going to jump ahead.
Well, wait, I've one more miracle that you probably wouldn't count as a miracle.
Okay,
I count it as a miracle, though.
All right, tell me.
So from Homer, I end up getting hospitalized. It's the first hospitalization that Lacey and I are married. And so this was the one that was about a year after we got married. Yeah. Okay. So we moved to Minneapolis and lived with my mom. During that time. And I remember I had to go to a Social Security office for something. I forget what specifically it was for. But in dealing with Social Security and government stuff and social work things, you learn to answer questions very succinctly with one-word answers. And so, the agent would be like, hey, ask a question of, did you whatever, just asking questions. And I would be like, yes or no, or short answers. Well, Lacey just starts opening up about our entire life and every little birthday card or any little whatever it was, that income that came in. And it was just a really funny example of how Lacey, when she gets nervous, she just starts talking and just starts giggling and talking. And I'm like, I was not very confident as a man, but I do remember leaving that Social Security office like, you will never come into a meeting with me ever again if that's how it's going to be. Anyways, the miracle is that whatever it was, we didn't get deducted or
well, I mean,
disqualified or whatever it was.
It wasn't that we weren't, or he wasn't being honest. It was just I didn't know what I was doing.
No, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Is not lying, but you do. I mean, anyone out there?
No, but I guess I feel like you're trying to be like, oh, we were lying on this, we were lying on that.
No.
I just wanted to break the lie, and I just didn't know what I was doing.
No, I know you were super nervous, but no, just growing up, you learn in medical stuff, right? Yeah. How to respond. Anyways, so that's a miracle.
Okay.
That's my nerve.
All right.
Yeah.
So, so fast forward. And I'm really, that whole season of our life I'm fast forwarding through is a lot of miracles of the Lord restoring our marriage. But we could save that for a different podcast. I think that would be a good podcast, just talking about the restoration of our marriage in that season. So I'll save that. But it was 2008. And at that point, or maybe up until then, Nathan and I really didn't have a desire to have children. And we had different reasons for this. His was that he had been told from the beginning that he couldn't have kids.
Right.
And so you just kind of locked your heart down away from that. And
and just how I was raised, different things there. Just basically,
Yeah.
Really killed that part of my heart.
Right. And for me, I was the oldest of 7 kids. I was an integral part in played an integral part in raising a lot of them, and I was over it. I didn't want to deal with babies, or I just didn't. I wanted to have a career, and I wanted to. I didn't want to. I wanted to be selfish, and I had just a lot of things I still had to work through about that, and so I did not want children until around 2008, and I was working with ministry.
Yeah.
And it might have even been before that, a little bit before that. But the real decision came in 2008. But I remember that we were working with a ministry called The Verge, and Nathan and I were doing a few conferences with them, and we ended up going to Michigan. And there was this couple that had a farmhouse, and they had these little girls, and which is really funny because one of the little girls now is like 20-something and works at the Bible Institute we used to work at. But anyway, yeah. Esther.
Is that who it was?
Yeah, it was her room.
Oh, my goodness.
So anyway, I'm up there, and it was just this picturesque little, girl's bedroom. And there was a little prayer on the wall of her mom, just that she had written out a prayer over her kids, and she put it on the wall. And I read it, and the Holy Spirit just hit me. And he just said to me, it is a good and valuable thing to be a mother. And it was like I just was overcome with this realization that I had been looking at it completely wrong. And the Lord changed my heart just like that. So he changed my heart. And around the same time, I don't know what the catalyst was for you, but
I was actually just thinking about that. I don't know if
you're always delayed with stuff.
That's
like
the thing.
this
I don't know if my heart actually, God had been laying it on our heart, and we'd gone through multiple things, right? And
but the timing's important, so I just want to keep that in. Okay, so I'll keep telling the story. You can add as you want. So anyway, the Lord changed my heart, and we started talking about it. And it was in March of 2008 that we decide finally that we're going to start pursuing it.
Yeah.
And so we go ahead, and what was really important to Nathan, and this is, everybody has their own opinion on this. This is fine. It was really important to Nathan that we didn't pass the F on. So if we were going to try in vitro, because that would be the only way for us to physically have children,
right?
That I didn't have the gene. So we went ahead and got me genetically tested, and I did not have the gene. And so we decided that we were going to try with in vitro. And the reason why we didn't pursue adoption at first was because everything that I had heard was that people were very against adoption to people with illnesses.
So expensive.
Yeah, and that was found to be true.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so the first run we did try in vitro, which was crazy, and that is expensive too.
Yeah.
But we found this guy in Alaska. It was really funny. He was one of the first doctors actually that
him and a buddy had invented
Yeah, in vitro.
In vitro.
And he's just like, has a little practice
Yeah.
over in Sultana. It was crazy. It was a crazy experience.
Yeah.
It was like, I'm not even going to get into it. If you have coffee with me, I will tell you the whole story. It is insane. But anyway, we go through this guy, find out that this is not going to work. In vitro is not going to work. That door is closed. It's not going to happen. And so we're like, okay, let's regroup. We're going to try adoption. So we look at this agency overseas and they're like, absolutely not. You can't have any kids from us. Goodbye. So they shut the door for us. And then we look at local places for adoption and they're like, absolutely not. You cannot.
No.
We're not going to approve you. And so, the years are going by. Okay. Yeah. And, we had talked about fostering, or adopting through the foster care agency, but the issue
I didn't want to.
Nathan, his parents had fostered when he was younger, and it was really hard on him
because I had to
lose siblings.
Exactly, we would get them for a while, and then they would be gone.
Right. And so he was like, I just don't want to do that. It's really emotionally hard, and I was so at that point, I was so baby crazy, like. I don't know. For those of you that experienced it, what I'm talking about. You just get to a point where you just really, really want to be a mom. And I didn't think I would survive the idea of a child taking care of a child and having that child removed. I just didn't think I could survive it. And then I also just didn't know if it came down to the wire if our home study would be approved because of Nathan's disease. So we end up where we start a college-age ministry group. And it was really fun. We had this group that we really loved. We do all this fun stuff, college-age stuff that you would do. And one of the girls that came, who's just a blast, Janice, her mom worked for the state in the OCS, in the Office of Children's Services. And she's she was
like the secretary admin assistant
to the director, And so Janice calls us up and she's like, "Hey,
wait, pause.
Yeah,
you and I before we."
Oh yeah.
You and I felt very.
Okay.
It was one day we felt ready that we needed to get a room ready.
Yes. Okay. So before Janice called us. And I think we were running the group, but we had just kind of settled into this pattern of no doors were opening, nothing was working out.
Right. It was after every door was shut.
Every door was shut. And I remembered that this time I had actually gotten to the point where I called the Wasilla office we were in. I called the Wasilla OCS office, and I just told them, my situation, because they do, if you go through foster care, they do have a... you can ask to be only put with kids that are legally free.
Yep.
And I asked that. I said, is that a possibility? And she just gave me the hardest time, like what a crap person I was because I wasn't willing to take in kids that just needed fostering, and how terrible could I be for not being willing to just give to kids in foster.
Great. We're terrible people. Moving on.
Oh my gosh. It was a horrible phone call. Yeah. She was terribly mean. And I'm like, I am not putting myself through that. Like, if you're not even willing to have a conversation with me, how could we work through this? How could we work through anything? So the Wasilla office I was like, there's no way I want to deal with you guys in this issue that's so close to my heart. And I mean, maybe eventually I could be able to foster just for fostering's sake, but at this time in my life, I can't. And so that door closed. Well, I think it was around Thanksgiving. I remember it being around Thanksgiving. The Lord said to us, and I don't know, do you guys... do you remember that movie by...
Field of Dreams?
Kevin Costner. Yeah. My sister Nicole had an obsession with it. She'd watch it every day for a long time. But in this plot, it's this old, weird movie where Kevin Costner is this farmer, and he starts hearing this voice that says, if you build it, they will come. It's such a weird plot when you think about it. So everybody thinks he's crazy. Yeah. So he goes out in his field and he builds a baseball diamond, and all these Major League Baseball players that are dead come and play baseball every night. It's a really weird plot. Anyway, the whole point of it is if you build it, they will come. Okay. Yeah. So the Lord just dropped in our hearts, get ready.
Yep.
And we didn't know what we were getting ready for, but we knew we were getting ready for a kid.
We had to like make this room in our house like this neutrally color.
Baby toddler, we weren't sure.
Maybe a baby, maybe a toddler, maybe a boy, maybe a girl.
Yeah.
Like we're like, okay, what do we? So we got a day bed that could
turn into a crib. You know, the progression crib.
Yep. And so we got that. We painted it a nice neutral blue and made it our seashell room. Because it was all sea, kind of oceany looking. And then we call it our just field of dreams room. Like, we're like, okay, God, like out of the blue, after all of this disappointment, he's like, get a room ready.
Right. And we had this old window that we had gotten from a garage sale years before. And Nathan painted seashells on it.
Yeah.
And we still have it.
Yeah.
It's kind of our memorial stone.
Yeah.
And it hung in that room. I remember going and buying the crib with you.
Yeah.
So we went and we got it ready. And so around a little bit after that time, Janice called us, the girl that came to our college group. And she goes, hey, my mom was just telling me about this 18-month-old girl who is needing placement. And she... you know, she has a bunch of food allergies. She has a bunch of different health issues, but she's very sweet, and they just can't get anybody to take her. Would you guys be willing? By the way, do you have any native blood? And I'm like, that sounds wonderful. Yeah. No, we do not.
Yeah. We're like so white, we're almost transparent.
Well, and, you know, and there's a lot of reasons for this in Alaska. There's a lot of need for native placement, which means that you have to have native blood to be able to take native placement because the federal government will fine the state, according to ICWA, if it doesn't have enough placements with tribal children placed with Indian, Native Alaskan people. And I get it. I actually understand why this is, because the tribes experienced incredibly
terrible racism,
terrible things that happened to them. And, you know, and we're talking about this happened to these people in the 60s. Like in Alaska, it was happening in the 60s. So if you think about it, the tribal elders now were the kids that were taken to the homes and beaten for speaking their language and, you know, terrible, terrible things, right? And so the tribes look at kids being taken by the government and go, it's the exact same thing. It's not always the case.
Right.
However, I can understand both sides. There is strong argument to both sides, honestly. And that is an entirely different podcast in itself. The villages in Alaska, and man, what is taking place there. So anyway, we are on the end of the spectrum of just wanting to love a kid.
Yep.
But we do not have any native blood.
Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. This is one of the many resources we make available for free at our website, cultivaterelationships.com. Our resources have helped people grow in their relationship with God and others. We've seen people set free from uncontrollable anger and paralyzing fear. We've witnessed estranged family members be reunited after working through our Freedom Booklet. We've helped people build healthy relationship and coping habits through our coaching videos. And all of these resources are made available for free because of the generous support of people like you. If you would like to become a partner, please visit cultivaterelationships.com/support. Now, I hope you enjoy the rest of this episode.
So I didn't even, honestly, it is so hard to get native placement if you don't have native blood. I literally just shut the door and thought, it's not going to happen. Yep. Didn't even think twice about it.
Right.
And I said, okay, Janice, yeah, whatever. Right. Sounds great. It's not going to happen. And put it out of my mind. Well, a few months later, she calls us back and says, if you guys get...
a home study.
No, not yet.
Not yet.
If you get registered as foster, or if you get trained as a foster home, then you can take her. Yep. Like, they will be able to consider it. So we went ahead and we got all of our stuff done for that, which was, I had to work with the office in our town, which is the one I was talking about earlier that I hated. But the child that they were looking at for us was actually out of the Anchorage office.
Yep.
So I'd mostly be working with the Anchorage office. So for me, that was an answer to prayer too, that I didn't have to work with
the Wasilla one?
Yeah, because I mean, I remember I was calling and calling and calling and calling and trying to get someone out to finalize our certification. I remember one day I had to bring him, like I sat in the office, brought him a coffee. I was doing whatever I could to try to like...
you would bring him donuts, you bring him coffees, just like...
Hi, here I am, you know, and so finally they did it. And so it was a really interesting process because Janice told us at first that she was legally free. Mm-hmm. And turns out she wasn't. But it's kind of like we got in this situation where already our hearts were so knit.
We had
this child.
No, our friend 100% snookered us in.
She lied.
She lied to us.
Yeah.
And then, to that point, okay, so, we get kind of our hearts attached and we're like, well, we're already in, you know.
Right. So we end up we go through a season. It was like a few months of having to drive into Anchorage every day.
First, Lacey got to meet Linda at the time. That was her name. I was at a doctor's appointment. And Lacey, we have a video of Lacey meeting Linda. And she comes in, sits on Lacey's lap, and just gushes over Lace. And her what do they call him? Her worker? Social worker at the time is like, wow. Like, she's never attached, like, in terms of, like, just gone to someone like this before. And so I get that video, and my heart starts melting. And so, we finally do, what is it? We have to do home visits.
Yeah, right? That's what I was talking about. We had to drive in for about a month and see her every day. And it was a long process. And also the part of the story I was going to tell was before the Field of Dreams room, before the Lord told us to get ready, actually. I remember I was crying out to him because when you're dealing with infertility, there's a few specific things that you go through. And the first step, I think, is super important, and the adoption community actually addresses this really well, is that not being able to have your own children is a loss and it's grief, and you have to process that.
Yeah.
And if you don't process that fully, and if you don't release that, then you're going to bring a lot of junk into your adoption, right? Because you're going to use a child to meet a need in you that you never fully processed.
Oh, yeah.
So that whole season the Lord brought us through. And I realized having a child, whether you can have it biologically or you adopt or whatever, having a child is a miracle. You can't control it. And it's one of those common miracles. Mm-hmm. It's a common miracle, but it's still a miracle because it's not something you can control.
Right.
And in the season, I just remember thinking it wasn't going to happen for us. And I was just crying out to the Lord. And the Lord brought to my mind that verse. I think he spoke it really clearly to me, is that when you ask the Lord, you know, if a good dad, that if you ask for a fish, he's not going to give you a stone. And that was I felt like it was a promise the Lord gave to me regarding us having kids, is that we've asked for a good thing and that he's not going to give us, you know, pain and suffering, a stone, right? Yeah. And that was something I felt very directly to my request for a child. So then we had the Field of Dreams robe. Yep. Then we had the pursuit of Linda. And so we're visiting Linda, and we go through about, I think, 2 months of this process. A lot of meetings, a lot of back and forth, a lot of, you know, paperwork, certifications, all this stuff. And we come to a point where they call us, Janice calls us, and she goes, you know, the family that currently has her is deciding, and there's a lot of issues there, is deciding whether or not they're going to keep her. And just pray, because we don't know what's going to happen. Yeah. And I remember just kind of feeling so overwhelmed, like, oh my gosh, like, what's happening, right? Yeah. And so defeated. And the Lord spoke to me really clearly that night, and he said to me, are you not going to even fight at all? And I remember thinking, I'm going to fight. And I just started praying, right? And so we were praying that night. And in the morning, they call us and they say, you're not going to believe it. We weren't even telling you guys the truth. The full truth was that there was no way this was going to happen. We really didn't think you would get her. But they came back and they said they want to release her so you guys can pursue this. And it was just such a miracle, right? And so we brought our daughter home. And the fullness of it took another 9 months. And there's a lot of miracles in the finalization of the adoption too, with it being a tribe. But I really felt like something at that point had broken. And it's really interesting because when we look back at her birthday, she was born March 27th, 2008. The exact week that we started to specifically pursue having a child. And yeah. So it's just, to us, I mean, it's such a miracle. And
down to the week that you and I had started talking and looking at pursuing having kids,
right?
Oh, goodness.
Our other daughter is no less of a miracle. I'm going to save her story for another day. But
yeah,
just felt led to share the story of our Field of Dreams room.
Yeah.
Because that was a pretty incredible thing.
Gets me every time. Every time.
Well, and that's the reason for your tattoo, huh?
Oh, goodness. Yeah.
Yeah.
I forgot the connection.
It's faith tattoo. He has another tattoo that's 3 lines, and it's supposed to represent the Trinity. And I remember he called me. He was in Minneapolis, and he was at a tattoo party.
My brother, it's basically it's like a Tupperware party
for tattoos.
But for tattoos,
so stupid.
So my brother's hosting this tattoo party, and he goes, "Hey, because you like Tupperware, you get free Tupperware." He goes, "Hey, I'm giving away a free tattoo." And my brother goes, "Hey, Nate, do you want this? Like, do you want? I'll give it to you." And I go, "Yeah. Actually, I do. I know exactly what I want. I want 3 lines."
So he calls me. He goes, "Hey, can I get this tattoo?" And I was like, "I don't care,
Yeah.
Get what you want. Just tell me, what is it?" And he's like, "It's 3 lines." And I'm thinking to myself, like 3 lines of text.
Like
like it's going to say something or whatever.
Yeah.
I was like, "What do you mean 3 lines?" And he's just like, "Well, just 3 lines." And I thought he was being like vague, like specific, like trying to like not tell me what it was going to be. I was so mad. I was
and she goes, "Fine,
whatever. Get whatever you want."
Yeah.
And then he comes home and it's like literally 3 lines.
So, yes, sorry, I forgot about the faith one. Yeah, I had gotten my faith tattoo on my birthday. That as a representation, as both looking back and looking forward to always have faith that God is always moving on our behalf. Oh, that one. That's a big story.
That was a good one, yeah.
Okay, so we have other stories. A lot of them are like us traveling, me with cystic fibrosis, having a machine. One of the times, the first time I ever traveled outside the U.S., outside of like Canada and Mexico, okay? Overseas, I'll say it that way. The first time we traveled overseas, it was to Ireland, and I had done all my research. I had purchased all the converters and inverters. We
called his hospital. We called everything. The machine place. I
even contacted a doctor who is the leading CF doctor in Ireland and got a connection there. And so, everything. We fly that night, and it takes about 24 hours from Alaska to get there. And I'm after 24 hours of not having a therapy, I'm struggle bussing. I'm wheezing and not feeling too good. So we get there, plug everything in, and I turn it on, and it just boom pops
the whole house.
The whole house. My machine is smoking. Because it's 220 over there, it's 110 here. And it was, all of that just blew up. So we just start praying. We're like,
we had, and people are going to be like, "You're so dumb, you didn't get a converter." We got converters.
I got converters.
It was something inside the machine that want to convert.
Yeah. It was just it was a issue. Yeah. Anyway, so we're praying. I'm still able to do, what was it, a nebulizer, or did that pop too?
That popped too.
So I have nothing.
You have nothing.
And so Lacey and I, we pray because it's evening by this point. The next day was a Saturday.
I remember just laying with you crying as we prayed and hoped you'd make it till morning.
I'm like, well, I guess I'm dying in Ireland.
Great.
So we get up Saturday, walk to the local hospital, and basically, and Lacey is able to do hand therapies, like a respiratory therapist do hand therapies, but really it was the nebulizer thing that was the most important, so I could get medication in my lungs. Well, the hospital ends up is like, oh yeah, here we have an extra nebulizer. Why don't you go ahead and take it, and you just keep it. And it was a battery operated one, like you just keep it. So like that was a huge. It
was huge, yeah. And we had not too long ago. I want to say in 2000 and. Well, I guess it was 2016.
12. Wait, what one?
16. When we went to Ireland. One of the other times we went. The night, and it was really funny because Hillrom, his machine, one of his main machines is made by Hillrom.
Yeah.
And their warranty doesn't extend to overseas, even though they're made in Ireland. It's really the funniest thing. I know, but it doesn't extend there. So we're getting ready to get on the plane the next morning, and we're in a hotel room in O'Hare waiting to go. And this has been like a hellish. We went on a ministry trip, and Ariana got like bit by a dog the first night. It was just like crazy trip.
Yeah.
And ends up where we're about ready to go to Ireland, and Nathan's machine breaks the night before we're about ready to go. And I mean, it wasn't the end of the world because I could do hand treatments the whole time. And when I say that, it's these respiratory therapy treatments where you manually do what a machine does. So the machine fills up a vest with air, and it has percussive kind of pressure. In different parts of his lungs, and it's like 2 parts in the front, 4 parts in the back, and 2 parts on the side here. And it's about 45 minutes. And when you do it by hand, you do the same thing, but 5 minutes each spot. And
it takes a lot longer. And
it takes a lot longer, and it takes a lot out of you. Like, I don't know how people choose that as a profession. I don't know why people choose to become respiratory therapists. Like, who signs up for that? That sounds terrible. Like, yeah, I want to do this for a living. Are you kidding me? Like, I barely want to do it to keep you alive. Like, no, thank you. I don't know. His mom used to have to do it for like 8 hours a day. 8 hours a day when he was a baby. Like, that is incredible. So I am like, okay. I just kind of set my heart on next 6 weeks. This is what I'm doing. You know, well, we end up getting over to Ireland, and the machine works fine, perfectly. Yeah. Like, it had completely died, completely broken. Yep. And it
even has like, so when that happens, on the front of the thing, it said, you turn it on, power on, it goes, error, call this number. Yeah. Like it lets you know, hey, we're
and then he called them, and they were like, yeah, it's done. Yeah. But we had to bring it with us anyway because we were already, in Chicago. So took it, and Nathan just for kicks plugged it in, and it worked fine. So, and we've had, along with that, it's like we've had different meds where his coverage wouldn't apply to all of it. Yeah. So he'd call. They'd be like, well, you still have $4,000 on it. And he'd be like, well, I guess I'm not going to get it, right?
Well, it's like the copay, right? The copay of a medication. And I'm like, 20% of 30,000? Yeah. I'm like, oh, hard pass.
Right. And so then, like, a day later, the pharmacy will call him. No, this happened one time.
No, they shipped it.
Oh, okay. They just shipped it. Right. They just shipped it. And we're like, okay. And we'll have like his social worker be like, well, you signed up for this program. And we're like, nope. Sure. Like, we didn't. Yeah. But we're glad we did. Like, great. Jesus signed us up. Yeah. We've had Jesus sign us up for so many programs. Yeah. And just honestly, a lot of our miracles have been getting the right person on the phone. Yeah. On our behalf. Mm-hmm. Like just the Lord arranging people that can be advocates for us that are able to resource correctly. Right. And that's what I'm talking about. The Lord kind of coming from different angles and meeting us in areas where we are completely overwhelmed. But I think I'm going to put a cap on your disease for now, even though there's tons of stuff with that.
I could take up the whole time.
I know. We really could. And, That's the thing, is like we were telling you, so many things about his disease are so needy that we just gotta kind of...
So like so another aspect, kind of moving away from the disease, but onto God still financially providing for us, is we've been full-time missionaries since 2013. Is that right? When we first went over to Ireland. And and we'll be praying, we'll need something, and people will just send us checks, right? So much so to where our girls, like, whenever we get a letter in the mail, they'll just...
Oh, well, this is when they were little.
Yeah.
I would open up, like, a card. This is so bad. This story is so bad. So I would open up a card, and they would look at me and go, How much?
Yeah. And we're
like, Carl,
come on.
You're so tacky.
Also, it's enough to cover.
Know, but it is, it is. I remember somebody...
This is what you were talking about, how miracles in our life have become such a normal thing.
Right.
That it can be something where we take it for granted.
Right.
You know?
Well, I remember it's kind of, there's this, so faith missions. I love faith missions, but the father of faith missions was Mueller. And he has this really famous story that I love, that he'd taken all these orphans and he didn't have a way to support them. He'd just take them in. And the Lord...
Because he felt like God was calling him to.
He did. And, the Lord started him in small exercises of faith until eventually he was caring for like 3,000 orphans. And one day this story is told of there's this little girl in his office, and she was the daughter of somebody that was there at the orphanage, but she was with him. And somebody came into his office. I think it was like the cook or whoever was running the school at the time. He said, "We don't have any food for breakfast." And Mueller's like unruffled. He gets up. He's like, "Okay, no problem," and grabs this little girl. He goes, "You want to see what God's going to do?" And so he takes her, and they go to the dining hall, and here's all these kids, and they're like sitting at the tables, and they're like, the empty bowls are there. And he prays, asks the Lord to bring the food. And, a minute later, there's a knock on the door, and this guy comes to the door. He's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm the milk delivery guy. My carriage just, this is a long time ago. The carriage just had a broken wheel, and I was wondering if you could use this milk because I got to take care of this whole thing. It's going to take me all day, and the milk will spoil." And he's like, "Bring her in, And then the next knock on the door, a few minutes later, the baker comes. He goes, "God woke me up at 2 a.m. in the morning and said, start baking for you. So I have all this bread." And he starts bringing in all this bread, right? And so it was just, I love that story because he had gotten to a point where he just isn't frazzled at all. It's, let's go see the miracle. Yep. And that's how I want to be. I want to be so in tune with the Lord and so moving in his will that whatever is coming at me, I can just say, "Ooh, this is going to be exciting." Yeah. Let's see what happens. What's going to happen? You know what I mean? Like in that attitude, instead of coming back in fear, and really fear is used as a weapon to shut us down. And what I've learned is that the fear is never going to stop attacking me.
Right.
And I keep waiting for it to stop. It's not going to stop. My response is what can change.
Right.
That's really the only thing I have control over. And is my response going to be, let's go see what the Lord's going to do? Or is it going to be retreat, retreat, retreat?
Yeah.
Depression, depression, depression.
Right.
Despair, despair, despair. And I think that's the place the Lord's been leading me to. And it sounds so silly, talking about all these miracles, because he has always proven himself faithful to us.
Yeah.
Every single time. And sometimes we might feel like we're taking the long way around the mountain, but he does come through for us.
Mm-hmm. And it may not always be how we... how we were praying.
Right. Okay.
Right?
So this kind of leads me to this story. So we decide in 2016 that we should leave Alaska to grow this ministry that is on our heart. And so we feel led to move to the hill country. And so we contact people down here. We feel like doors are opening.
Yep.
We decide that we are going to buy a house, our very first house ever. And the Lord kind of opened doors for that. And like I said, we're trying to work this all out. Well, this was on the heels of that terrible time we were talking about with the dog bite and the machine breaking and the Ireland trip. And then, this is fun, Nathan was hospitalized in between that. And I'm trying to get everything sold in Alaska. And moving to and from Alaska is not a small ordeal. And so we're doing that. We're trying to buy a house for the first time. And we are full-time supported ministry, you know, so that's a wreck. And so we find this house finally. And the housing market was pretty popping at the time, right? Yeah. So we end up finding this house. It's perfect. Put an offer in. It gets accepted. And we're supposed to close like on the road, like on the Alcan on the way down. Yeah. You know? So we have everything in line. And we end up...
This is August.
It's August. Supposed to close July 30th.
We put in an offer...
June.
Well, I was going to say, we were actually visiting Burnett.
In June.
In an airport.
Oh, when we put in the offer? Yeah. We put in the offer in between security and boarding our plane. Yes, it was a very... Life with us is never dull.
Listen, I dream of the day...
Fast.
I dream of the day I'm bored. I can't wait to be bored someday.
Okay. So anyway, we're supposed to close. We don't close. So we pull into Texas in our little Honda. Most of our possessions sold. 2 little girls. They're 6 and 8 at the time. And we don't have a place to live. Like, we don't have a place to land. We're just like, we've been on the road 11 days. And we want to get out of the car. We just don't know where. So there's actually a family in the church that had mercy on our souls. Yes. And they let us come stay with them for a little while, like a few days. And
so they took us in immediately.
Like that night we showed up, and it was really great. Like we had to play. Our friend called us, said, "Hey, these people said they didn't know us. They never met us," which is pretty incredible. So we went and we stayed with them, and I was talking to a realtor, and she's like, "Oh, just a little bit longer." Well, you know, after about a week, these people that took us in were like, "Hey, you gotta go." Yep. So, because I mean, they didn't realize they were taking in people that were homeless. They thought we had a home. Yeah. Well, it turns out, joke's on them, we don't have a home. Yeah. So we're not closing. And I'm calling the Motel 6. And I remember just crying, like sitting in the end of bed, just crying, like, oh my gosh, we have to move into a hotel room. And so it is, I think, like 1:00 in the afternoon, and we were having to move into the hotel room that night. And we get another call from our friend, and he says, okay, there's this guy, he owns a resort here, Thunderbird Resort, and he said you guys can come stay there. So we actually move over to this cabin there, and they allowed us to stay there for 6 weeks until our house closed. And it was really interesting, because here I am, and I'm at this place, and it was nice. It was on a lake. Yeah. There's a pool. No, hold on, get to that. But I was just like so performance oriented. It's about 20 minutes out of town. Yeah. And so I have these 2 little kids, and for me to do anything productive, I have to drive into town with my kids and figure that out, because there's no cell phone service. There's no internet out there at the camp. And I was just like, for a few days, just trying to make it work, right? And finally the Lord says to me, Lacey, you have had such a crazy season. Can you not see that I've put you in this place to relax for a little while? Why can't you do that? Why are you trying to push all the things? And I just wanted to like show everybody that I could get things done, you know? And the Lord's like, no, I know what you need, right? And so that, to me, that was such a huge learning time for me to be like, wow, this isn't the Lord
withholding
from me. He's pushing me into a place. And so I finally relaxed with my kids. We had a great time. We swimming in the pool, and, you know, we're warm weather people for the first time in our lives. We were able to experience what it's like to not live in the frigid north. And, you know, once I was able to release and realize that this was all happening and the Lord's hand was on it for a reason, it was just, I could see the joy in it. And
but that's what I'm talking about when I say we have to release how we believe God should answer a question.
Exactly. Me too.
Or
right?
answer our prayers.
Yeah.
He will answer better than what we pray for if we allow him to. Or we could just, what is it, where you shoehorn yourself into an answer and then it doesn't work out and you're like, but how come God worked it out this way? And it's like, no, you did that. You forced a hand or whatever it is. But it's living, okay, God, here's our prayer request, and we hold it out to you with our hands open. How do you want to answer it? Right? And to you, it was, all right, you guys, we just moved to a new place. We got to get our ministry up and running. Boom, boom, boom. Get it going. Get people invited. And God's like, no, I want you to rest. Can you just rest for a little bit?
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about that because I think that so many times we can invalidate the miraculous in our life because we refuse to trust God that there's value in the season that we're in.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like to believe that God is moving on our behalf and he's for us, no matter what things are looking like around us, and be able to allow him to reveal the truth of it, the truth of what is important to him, I think is so important. Yeah. We moved here to start this ministry 6 years ago. And the first few years were incredibly difficult. In the midst of it, Nathan talks about this sometimes, but he went through like some of the worst depression you've ever went through in your whole life. And he had a really major surgery and things were not happening the way we wanted to. And it was really, really bad. And I remember during that time, the Lord just highlighting this song to me. It was actually a song that Nathan and I would play a lot. And I want to read it because I want to talk about this concept. It's called...
And it being a Christmas season, it's a Christmas song.
Yeah, it's a Christmas song.
It is, yeah.
But it's called Seasons, and it's by Hillsong. And
I will link the song in the notes. Yep.
It says, like the frost on a rose, winter comes for us all. Oh, how nature acquaints us with the nature of patience. Like a seed in the snow, I've been buried to grow, for your promise is loyal, from seed to sequoia. I know though the winter is long, even richer, the harvest it brings. Though my waiting prolongs even greater. Your promise for me like a seed, I believe that my season will come. Lord, I think of your love, like the low winter sun. And as I gaze, I am blinded in the light of your brightness. And like a fire to the snow, I am renewed in your warmth. Melt the ice of this wild soul till the barren is beautiful. I can see the promise. I can see the future. You're the God of the seasons, and I'm just in the winter. If all I know of harvest is that it's worth my patience, then if you're not done working, God, I'm not done waiting. You can see my promise even in the winter, because you're the God of greatness, even in a manger. For all I know of seasons is that you take your time. You could have saved us in a second, and instead you sent a child. Like a seed you were sown for the sake of us all. From Bethlehem soil grew Calvary's sequoia. And it's just this concept that it just hit me in this song. It's like, yeah, God could have just, saved civilization in 1 second. Yet when he sent Christ as a child, it was done. It was complete. And I mean, it was like everything, you know what I mean? The fullness of time, Christ was born. And it was this season of waiting for his death and resurrection, though, 30 years to see that fulfillment. And there's value in it. There's value in the waiting. There's value in the seasons. There's value in whatever place the Lord has us, but we have to believe that the miracle has been accomplished. Yeah. And so I want that to resonate in your mind, that one line, you could have saved us in a second, and instead you sent a child. And this Christmas time, as you're thinking about these things that you are holding on to, that you are waiting for the Lord to answer, just know that your good dad, he has not forgotten you, and that he is working on your behalf. He is moving for you.
Yeah, and I would wherever you find yourself, maybe it's in fulfilled promises, maybe it's in you're just waiting for the promise, maybe you're in a season where you've abandoned your promise because of disappointment. My encouragement is to spend some time, especially Christmas, being incredibly intentional on thanking God for the things that He has done in you. If you're married and your spouse, if you have kids and you have a family in your family, but there's nothing more powerful as a spiritual weapon than I would say giving God intentional thanks and praise for what He's done and for what He's going to do. I know for Lacey and myself, like you said, like you heard, we've been through a lot. We've been through a lot of really difficult seasons. And I would say to the extent that I am able to thank God and choose to offer up a sacrifice of praise when I don't feel it, my ability to do that, the extent to which I'm able to do that, is the extent to which I'm able to see God moving in my life and the life of those around me, and being able to have patience for the times that I need patience. But I would say this season, sit down, like I said, even with a friend, or if you're married, with your spouse, of intentionally giving God thanks, and choose to start a list of things that God has done. And it might be something where you're like, I've already thanked God for this, but I have nothing else to thank Him for. Well, thank Him again. And just start that list over again and thank Him for the things that God's been doing in your life. Yeah, so thank you. Oh, man, that was an emotional one.
Do you want me to pray?
Yeah.
Or do you want to pray?
No, I'll let you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lord God, I thank you that you have purpose for every season that you have us in, that you are good and that you are faithful. And I ask that as we go forward into this next season of our life, that we may continue to look to you, knowing that you're a good dad and you have good for us. I pray that we may refuse to let fear cripple us or intimidation keep us back, but that we may face the next thing in our life with the attitude of, let's go see what God's going to do.
Amen.
I pray for that in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. All right. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Merry Christmas.
Oh, yeah. Merry Christmas. Okay. Goodbye.